So on that subject, continuous improvement, you talk in the book about practice and the difference between, I think you use the words directed practice versus regular, undirected practice. And it reminded me of, I think in running, there's a phrase junk miles, which maybe indicate, I've never actually been a runner, so I can only hypothesize what it means, but I guess it means kind of running that doesn't really contribute to your improved conditioning. And what is the difference between directed practice and undirected practice in the spirit of Kaizen and self-improvement?
So let's take running as actually the perfect example. So when I started to try to understand, the science of achievement, right, beyond bumper sticker wisdom, what do we really know as a science about experts and how they got that way? I quickly found myself at the doorstep of Anders Ericsson, who's the world expert on world experts. He studies what experts do that make them different from the rest of us, right? It's a great job. He goes to like the Sudoku tournaments and he studies, World Cup soccer players, and he refers to it actually as deliberate practice, and he would like to say that deliberate practice is different from anything else that we do in 4 important ways. And I'm going to come back to running as an example, but the first thing when you're doing truly deliberate practice is that it's extremely intentional. It's problem solving, something in particular, like not like I'm going to come into Google and be a better CEO, whatever it is. It's like, I'm going to say that the first 15 seconds of my presentations are going to be a little sharper. I mean, it's extremely, extremely precise. That's the first thing, a very specific goal that you're working on. And often it's a weakness, not a strength. Second is 100% focus, or as some coaches would say, like Pete Carroll at the Seahawks, practicing with great effort, right? Third is feedback. Ideally, right away, and ideally information rich. And fourth, the kind of refinement that you reflect on and you try the whole thing over again, right? In fact, these 4 things are incredibly straightforward, and you might wonder why only world-class experts do it. But let's come back to running. So when I heard about this research on deliberate practice, I asked Anders, why is it that I have gone running pretty much every day for years, and I'm not a second faster than I ever was, right? Isn't that evidence that you're wrong, that it's not thousands and thousands of hours of practice? He started asking me questions like, well, when you go out for a run, do you have a goal, like a certain time, right? Or are you trying to run, hills and so? No, I'm taking the same route, every time I go out around my neighborhood. And he said, okay, well, that's great. What do you do when you're running? I was like, well, I listen to NPR and, any other podcast because I'm trying to distract myself. And he said, well, that's interesting because people who are trying to improve their running are actually concentrating on their running and their strides and their breathing. All right. And he said, so how are you getting feedback on your running? I mean, are you keeping your times? Are you measuring your heart rate? Do you have a coach who's looking at your form? No, and no, right? And then he said, are you going back every time when you run and thinking to yourself, what can I refine here, right? Before this next repetition, what is there that I can do differently? No. And he said, well, then I can tell you why you're not getting any better at running. And that is, those thousands of hours are not thousands of hours of deliberate practice. So I think this idea that, we should be getting better at things, we can unpack that a little. It's not just going out and trying hard. It's actually trying hard in those 4 very specific ways.